The Hippias Major is believed to be one of Plato's earlier dialogues, where the figure of Socrates engages in dialectic with the sophist Hippias. It is called the Hippias Major to differentiate it from another, much shorter Platonic dialogue which also features Hippias, called the Hippias Minor. The work centres on a debate, carried on ironically by Socrates from the position of a third party, as to the nature of kalon, a term which is often translated as beauty, but which can also be translated as noble or good. The debate works through 7 definitions, increasingly subtle, until the pair reaches an impasse and the debate breaks down. There has been controversy since the middle of the 19th century as to the authenticity of the dialogue, with arguments from some that the vocabulary of the work indicates later authorship. Proponents of authenticity indicate the quality of the piece in comparison to other spurious works. There is no way to prove either position, although most scholars now accept the work as probably authentic. Before we discuss the dialogue, we should discuss the figure of Hippias. He was a sophist, a wandering teacher, who came from the city of Elis and was a contemporary of Socrates. He endeavoured for universality in all things. He attempted to compose works in every available genre of literature. And it was said that once he appeared at Olympia attired in a costume entirely of his own making, right down to the ring on his finger. He was famous for his memory, and he developed a system of mnemonics. He put this skill to frequent use and was said to be willing to lecture to anyone on anything, from astronomy through to ancient history. In the 2 Platonic dialogues named after him, Plato depicts him as a vain and arrogant character. The dialogue opens with Hippias and Socrates talking to one another. Socrates notes it has been a long time since Hippias has visited Athens, and Hippias replies it is because he has been spending most of his time on important embassies in Sparta, thus implying that Athens is unimportant in contrast. Socrates ironically praises Hippias by stating that his role in these embassies shows him to be a great and wise man, but then asks why he partakes in politics, unlike the older sages and philosophers of Greece. Hippias replies it is because of their incapacity, to which Socrates replies ironically in 281d, then, for heaven's sake, just as the other arts have progressed and the ancients are of no account in comparison with the artisans of today, shall we say that your art has also progressed, and those of the ancients who were concerned with wisdom are of no account in comparison to you? Socrates goes on to praise Hippias ironically for making money from his teaching, a charge Plato often lays at the feet of the sophists, with Hippias apparently oblivious to the snide remarks. Socrates then asks Hippias where he made the most of his money, suggesting that it must be Sparta, for that is where he spends the majority of his time. Hippias responds that no, it is forbidden by law that a foreigner should teach the sons of Sparta. Socrates remarks ironically it would seem odd that the Spartans would choose not to allow Hippias to improve their children, which, if Hippias could do, would actually be contrary to good law, leading Socrates mockingly to state in 285b, then, my friends, we find that the Spartans are lawbreakers, and that too in the most important of affairs, they who were regarded as the most law-abiding of men. This leads to an amusing discussion as to what Hippias does in Sparta while providing public orations. Apparently, he is asked to recite the long lists of genealogies of the gods and heroes. Socrates remarks that it seems the Spartans are using Hippias in the same way young children ask old women to tell them stories. Interestingly, I would suggest that the Spartan treatment of Hippias mirrors the treatment of the poets in Plato's Republic, in the practice of praising them but then sending them away, in denying them access to their children's education and not paying them like in other cities. Hippias launches into a recount of one of his most recent speeches in Sparta, where he discoursed on the noble and beautiful pursuits of youths, and finishes by telling Socrates to bring others to hear him give a full recount on a later date. Socrates uses this speech on beauty to launch into the main point of the dialogue. He recounts that recently he had been confronted in discourse by a rude and abrupt questioner, clearly here a reference to Socrates' demanding search for truth, the alter ego that forces him to follow the argument wherever it takes him. Socrates recounts as per 286 C and D, recently, my most excellent friend, as I was finding fault with some things in certain speeches as ugly and praising other things as beautiful, he threw me into confusion by questioning me very insolently, somewhat after this fashion. How, if you please, do you know, Socrates, said he, what sort of things are beautiful and ugly? For, come now, could you tell me what the beautiful is? In this context, beautiful or fine translates from the Greek word kalon, a general term of commendation that is often rendered as beautiful, amiable, or noble, but often simply means good. Its opposite, aishron, means ugly, disgusting, shameful, or foul. Here Socrates is invoking the priority of definition. That is, how can anyone judge something to have a certain characteristic without knowing what said characteristic truly is? Socrates then asks Hippias to help him find the definition of beauty, so that he will be able to defeat the questioner in the next debate. Hippias agrees, and Socrates asks that he be permitted to take the role of the questioner to better understand how to refute his opponent. With this setting, the core of the dialogue now begins. After some boasting, Hippias tells Socrates he will easily give him an answer which will shut up his questioner, and tells him that beauty is a beautiful maiden. Socrates then quizzes Hippias if, by the same measure, a beautiful horse would also be considered beauty, and even if a beautiful pot would be beautiful. After some consternation, Hippias agrees that, yes, in each case the maiden, the horse, and the pot would be beautiful, but the pot would not be as beautiful as the maiden or the horse. Socrates, as the questioner, pounces, stating that surely the maiden would not be as beautiful as the gods, so therefore Hippias has merely provided a list of things in increasing beauty order, as at the bottom a pot, then a mare, then the maiden, then the gods. Socrates says that the questioner will respond in 289c, when you were asked for the beautiful, do you give as your reply what is, as you yourself has said, no more beautiful than ugly? Here Hippias' first answer is a particular example of beauty, the issue being that this answer fails the generality requirement. It does not explain all cases of beauty. Unperturbed by his initial setback, Hippias now proceeds to a second definition of beauty, in 289e. If you reply to your opponent, this that you ask about, the beautiful, is nothing else but gold, he will be thrown into confusion and will not attempt to confute you. For we all know, I fancy, that wherever this is added, even what before appears ugly will appear beautiful when adorned with gold. Socrates then replies that his opponent will call him mad, because by saying gold is beautiful, he will be calling Phidias, the most famous sculptor of the age, a bad artist. The reasoning is that when Phidias crafted the statue of Athena, he crafted her flesh from ivory and her eyes from white stone instead of gold. The issue with this definition is that gold is not fine in every context. This violates the exclusion requirement, for it does not exclude non-fine things. Socrates goes on to propose another situation where gold would be less suitable, thus less beautiful, in 290d. Well then, he will say, when someone has boiled the pot of which we were just speaking now, the beautiful one, full of beautiful soup, is a golden ladle appropriate to it, or one made of fig wood? Socrates answers his own question in 290e, is it not evidently the one of fig wood? For it is likely to make the soup smell better, and besides, my friend, it will not break the pot, thereby spilling the soup, putting out the fire, and making those who are to be entertained go without their splendid soup, whereas the golden ladle would do all of these things. He here is implying that Hippias' answer fails to satisfy the explanation requirement. Generally, to explain Xness, someone or something must be X no matter what. If fire explains heat, that is because it is always hot. But gold cannot explain beautifulness because gold is not always beautiful. Hippias, now having been refuted twice, and apparently in a bit of a huff, puts forward a third definition in 291d and e. I say then, that for every man and everywhere it is most beautiful to be rich and healthy, and honoured by the Greeks, to reach an old age, and after providing a beautiful funeral for his deceased parents, to be beautifully and splendidly buried by his own offspring. This would appear to be an argument that it is beautiful to live in with the traditional conception of the good life. Plato then turns to the myths of heroes and gods to query this answer, for many of the gods and demigods failed to achieve such a life, while others did. But it would be conventionally blasphemous to suggest the gods were not beautiful for failing to attain such mortal conceptions of beauty. Once again, Hippias has failed to find an example of beauty that satisfies both the generality and exclusion requirements for beauty, in each of his three answers, ranging from a particular, being a maiden, to a mass substance, gold, to a universal, the good life. He's failed to provide an answer with explanatory power. With Hippias having failed, Socrates begins to tender some possible solutions to his question. In the form of the questioner, he puts forward the possibility that beauty pertains to appropriateness, as in 293e, When we said gold was beautiful for those things for which it was appropriate, but not for those which it was not, and that all the other things were beautiful to which this quality pertains, so examine this very thing, the appropriate, and see if, perchance, this is the beautiful. Hippias is satisfied with this answer, for even the ugly man, when it's hired appropriately, can look beautiful. However, this then leads Socrates to ask, does this make him beautiful, or merely give the appearance of beauty? If on the inside he is still ugly, then clearly beauty cannot be the same as appropriateness. Socrates now turns to a second definition in 295c. Perhaps whatever is useful shall be for us beautiful, but I said it with this reason for my thought. Beautiful eyes, we say, are not such as they seem to be so, which are unable to see, but those which are able and useful for seeing. By this metric, power is beautiful, for in the polis what is more useful than power? Hippias finds this definition very persuasive, especially considering his work as a sophist teaching others to win their way with words through the courts. But Socrates again detects an issue. Cannot a person use power, or any other useful thing, to achieve ends which are bad? For instance, not knowing the true outcome, they would strive after a goal only to injure themselves in the exercise of power. As such, it would appear that again, power and utility do not describe beauty without qualification, thus falling foul of the previous errors. Socrates then posits that perhaps beauty is that which is beneficial, as in causing the good. Looking back at the last two definitions, it's easy to see where this comes from. Such benefit is what determines a thing being appropriate or useful. However, this leads to a paradox, because that which is beneficial procreates that which is beautiful, just as a father begets a son. However, just as the father is not the son, the beautiful is not the beneficial or the good. Thus, beauty is not good, an answer which satisfies neither Socrates or Hippias. At a loss, Socrates puts forth an almost hedonistic conception of beauty in 297e. Just see, how would it help us towards our goal if we were to say that which was beautiful, which makes us feel joy? I do not mean all pleasures, but that which makes us feel joy through hearing and sight. However, again, this falls down when Socrates recoils against his own argument. Stating the questioner would laugh at his idea of separating out the forms of pleasure and then describing carnal pleasures such as foods, odours, and sex as beautiful. At this point of the dialogue, Hippias becomes increasingly laconic in his answers before finally breaking up the discussion with accusations of Socrates engaging in meaningless wordplay. After some acrimonious back and forth, the dialogue terminates with Socrates quipping in 304e, "So, I think, Hippias, that I have been benefited by this conversation with both of you, for I think I know the meaning of the proverb, beautiful things are difficult." The Hippias Major, like many of the earlier dialogues, reaches an abortive point where the dialogue breaks down. However, it reflects the view of beauty which Plato explores in other dialogues. His vision of beauty is much in line with his later conception of the forms found in the Republic. Beauty is not any single instance of a beautiful thing. Rather, Socrates wants Hippias to explain the essence of beauty, the cause of all other occurrences of beauty in the world. Importantly, it is stipulated that it must not be the cause of the appearance of beauty, but only true beauty, the real deal, through and through. Yet beauty in this conception is different from other forms of virtue. For instance, the holiness discussed in the Euthyphro, or the temperance, wisdom, and courage discussed in the Protagoras. It is something visible and tangible, while at the same time intelligible as the other forms of virtue are. Something unique in the Platonic metaphysics.